Alfred the Great, the king who faced the Vikings. The year was 870 AD. In less than 5 years, the Great Heathen Army had completely transformed the political map of England. Northumbria had been conquered. Mercia was struggling to maintain its independence. Several major cities were under Scandinavian rule, and thousands of Viking warriors remained on the island, ready to continue their campaign. Only one major kingdom remained capable of resistance: Wessex. Located in southern England, Wessex was much more than just a territory. For many Anglo-Saxons, it represented the last hope of preventing the entire island from falling under the dominion of invaders from the north. Its king was Ethelred, an experienced ruler who understood the gravity of the situation. By his side was his younger brother, Prince Alfred, a man who at first glance seemed very different from the great warriors celebrated in the songs of the era. From childhood, Alfred showed a keen interest in learning. While many young nobles devoted most of their time to military training, he spent hours listening to stories, learning Latin, studying religious texts, and seeking to understand the events of the past. His mother, Osburh, played a pivotal role in this upbringing. An old tradition recounts that she showed her sons a beautiful, illuminated book of poems and promised to give it to whichever of them could memorize it first. Alfred accepted the challenge and won. Although some details of this story may have been embellished by medieval chroniclers, it reveals the special place knowledge held in his life. In his youth, Alfred traveled to Rome, where he encountered the diverse religious and political traditions of Christian Europe. These experiences broadened his worldview and helped shape the ruler he would become years later. But now there was no time for study. England was at war. After consolidating their hold on the north, the Vikings turned their attention to Wessex. Their leaders knew that this kingdom was the greatest obstacle to the complete conquest of the island. If Wessex fell, there would likely be no organized force left capable of halting the Scandinavian advance. In late 870, the Great Army launched a new offensive. The invaders crossed borders, burned settlements, and advanced toward the kingdom's key strongholds. Their goal was to force Wessex to fight in the open field, where they believed they held the advantage thanks to years of military campaigning. The first major clash took place near the town of Reading. The Vikings had established a fortified camp between two rivers, naturally protecting their flanks and making a direct assault difficult. Reinforced wooden palisades, makeshift trenches, and hundreds of seasoned warriors made the site an extremely tough position to take. Even so, Ethelred and Alfred decided to act quickly. The forces of Wessex marched toward the camp, hoping to catch the invaders off guard before reinforcements could arrive. The plan, however, did not go as expected. The Vikings reacted with impressive speed. Their lines held firm, while archers and spearmen halted the Saxon advance. After hours of fierce fighting, the men of Wessex were forced to retreat. The defeat was a heavy blow. It demonstrated that courage alone would not be enough to defeat this enemy. But just a few days later, a new opportunity arose. The two armies met again, this time on the hills of Ashdown. The terrain was completely different. There were no walls or fortifications protecting the Vikings there. The hills offered space for an open battle. According to the Anglo-Saxon chronicles, before the fighting began, King Ethelred remained in prayer, attending Mass. Realizing that time was of the essence, Alfred temporarily took command of the army and organized the troops while awaiting his brother's arrival. It was a risky decision. Before him stood one of the largest armies ever seen in England. Even so, Alfred ordered the advance. The Saxons climbed the hills under a rain of arrows. Raised shields offered the soldiers partial protection as the distance between the forces rapidly closed. When the two lines finally clashed, the impact echoed across the battlefield. Wooden shields splintered, axes carved a path through the formations. Swords met spears. Men fought in close-quarters combat, every step gained at the cost of immense sacrifice. The battle raged for hours. At various points, neither side seemed willing to yield, but little by little, the men of Wessex began to gain ground. Alfred's leadership proved decisive. Even while still a prince, he demonstrated composure under pressure, the ability to regroup his troops, and a knack for exploiting his adversaries' moments of weakness. By the end of the fight, the Vikings retreated. The Battle of Ashdown became one of Wessex's first major victories against the Great Heathen Army. News of the victory spread hope across England. Perhaps the Vikings were not invincible after all. Yet, the war was far from over. A few days later, fresh clashes broke out at Basing. This time, the advantage shifted back to the Scandinavians. The losses suffered at Ashdown were quickly offset by the discipline and experience of their commanders. Wessex was forced to retreat once more. Shortly thereafter, another battle took place at Mertun, known today as Merton. Once again, the fighting was fiercely contested. For hours, neither side could secure a decisive advantage. But in the end, the Vikings held the field. The Saxon forces withdrew again. The succession of battles took a heavy toll. Hundreds of soldiers had perished. Resources were running low. The population lived in a state of constant fear. Then, a new blow struck Wessex. In early 871, King Ethelred died. The exact cause remains a subject of debate among historians. Some believe he succumbed to wounds sustained during the military campaigns. Others suggest his death was caused by an illness, aggravated by the strain of war. Regardless of the cause, the timing could not have been worse. The kingdom was facing the greatest invasion in its history, and now it needed a new king. All eyes turned to Alfred. Still young, he took on the responsibility of leading England's last great independent kingdom. Before him stood the most powerful army in Western Europe. Many believed that Wessex would fall within a few months. Few imagined that this reserved, book-loving, and deeply religious man would forever change the destiny of England. As the crown was placed upon his head, Alfred understood that he was inheriting far more than a kingdom. He was inheriting a war that would decide not only the future of Wessex, but the future of all England. And the challenges awaiting him would be even greater than any battle fought until then. When Alfred was crowned King of Wessex in 871 AD, few believed his reign would last long. The Great Heathen Army remained largely intact, while the kingdom had just lost its previous ruler and was reeling from years of relentless warfare. The situation was dire. The countryside had been devastated by successive military campaigns. Many villages lay abandoned. Agricultural output was dwindling. Trade was faltering, and hundreds of families sought refuge behind the walls of the few remaining safe towns. Despite the hardships, Alfred refused to accept defeat. In the early years of his reign, he alternated between military clashes and temporary peace agreements. On several occasions, he paid tribute to the Vikings to buy time, reorganize his army, and protect the civilian population. To some of his contemporaries, these decisions appeared to be signs of weakness. In reality, they were strategic choices. Alfred understood that he lacked the resources to continuously confront a battle-hardened and numerically superior enemy. Every lost battle meant the loss of irreplaceable soldiers. Every victory came at too high a cost for a kingdom fighting virtually alone. Meanwhile, the Vikings continued to receive reinforcements from Scandinavia. New ships crossed the North Sea. More warriors were arriving in England. The campaign was shifting from a mere military invasion into a broad movement of permanent occupation. Some commanders established farms. Others took control of key trading centers. Many Scandinavian families began new lives on the conquered lands. It seemed nothing could halt the Viking advance. Then came the winter of 877-878. The Scandinavian leaders decided to launch a surprise offensive against Wessex during a time of year when military campaigns usually slowed down. It was a bold move, and it nearly destroyed the kingdom. In early 878, the Viking leader Guthrum launched a surprise attack on Chippenham, where Alfred and his court were spending the winter. The offensive was so swift that many Saxon soldiers did not even have time to organize a defense. The invaders seized the town. Several nobles were captured. Others narrowly escaped. Alfred fled with a small group of loyal men, traversing forests, rivers, and marshlands, as the Vikings consolidated their control over much of Wessex. For a time, it seemed all was lost. The chronicles describe that as the darkest moment in the kingdom's history. Many inhabitants believed Alfred had died. Others swore allegiance to the invaders to protect their families. Several nobles abandoned the resistance. But the king was still alive. He took refuge in the marshes of Athelney, an isolated region surrounded by bogs, small islands, and dense vegetation, located in what is now the county of Somerset. There, where the terrain made it difficult for large armies to maneuver, Alfred found the perfect hiding place. Conditions were extremely harsh. The few men who remained by his side lived in makeshift huts. Food was scarce. The cold and damp made daily life even harder. Even so, that small refuge became the center of the English resistance. It was at Athelney that Alfred began to rebuild Wessex. Far from great halls and castles, he returned to doing what he had always done best: observing, studying, and planning. While Guthrum believed victory was only a matter of time, Alfred carefully analyzed the mistakes made by English kings in previous decades. He realized that the Vikings were winning not only because of their courage, but because they were highly mobile. They attacked swiftly. They chose the moment of battle. They would withdraw before the kingdoms could muster their armies. Furthermore, they used rivers as highways, moving troops and supplies with great efficiency. If Wessex continued to fight in the same way, it would be destroyed. A complete change in strategy was required. Little by little, messengers began to travel secretly across the kingdom. They carried messages to nobles who remained loyal. They summoned former soldiers. They sought volunteers. They organized meeting points. The resistance was beginning to rise again. According to one of the most famous stories in English tradition, Alfred was taken in by a peasant woman during this period. Without recognizing the king, she asked him to keep an eye on some loaves of bread baking over the fire while she attended to other chores. Lost in thought and plans to reclaim the kingdom, Alfred completely forgot about the bread. It burned. Upon her return, the woman scolded him severely, never imagining she was speaking to the King of England. Although historians view this tale as more symbolic than historical, it has endured for centuries because it embodies a key trait attributed to Alfred. Even in the darkest times, he never stopped looking to the future. While many rulers would have given up, he turned every defeat into a lesson. In the spring of 1878, the time for action finally arrived. Messengers fanned out across Wessex, summoning every free man capable of fighting. The call echoed through villages, farms, and small strongholds. Little by little, farmers, craftsmen, hunters, and former warriors set aside their daily tasks and headed for the rendezvous point designated by the king. It was far more than just a new army. It was Wessex's last hope. As he gathered his men at Egbert's Stone, Alfred realized that a strong sense of unity still bound his people together. Despite years of war, defeat, and destruction, thousands of Saxons answered the call. They were not fighting merely for a king. They were fighting for their homes, for their families, for the survival of their kingdom. Before the final march, Alfred addressed his soldiers. The chronicles did not record his exact words, but he likely reminded them that there was no longer any room to retreat. If they were defeated, Wessex would vanish. If they won, England would have a chance to survive. Across the way, Guthrum remained confident. His army controlled much of the territory. The Vikings believed the Saxon king was still hiding in the marshes, unable to organize any significant resistance. Little did they know that while they celebrated their conquests, Alfred was carefully preparing for the confrontation that would change the course of the war. Before long, the two armies would meet on a field called Edington. There, not only the future of Wessex would be at stake, the future of England itself would be on the line. The impending battle would decide which people would dominate the British Isles for generations to come. The Battle of Edington and the birth of a New England. In the spring of 878 AD, two men were preparing to decide the fate of England. On one side stood Alfred, King of Wessex. Months earlier, he had lost much of his kingdom, taking refuge in the marshes of Athelney, with only a small band of followers. Many believed his cause was lost. On the other side stood Guthrum, one of the most powerful Viking leaders of the era. His forces controlled vast regions of England, and his successive victories made it seem as though the complete conquest of the island was merely a matter of time. Now, both were marching toward a decisive confrontation. After leaving Athelney, Alfred led his army to Egbert's Stone, where men from different regions of Wessex answered the king's call. Farmers left their crops. Blacksmiths abandoned their workshops. Hunters, artisans, and veteran warriors gathered under the same banner. With each passing day, more soldiers arrived. It was not the largest army in England, but it was an army driven by a common goal. They knew this might be their last chance to prevent the destruction of Wessex. After reorganizing his troops, Alfred began the march toward Edington, a small settlement where Guthrum's forces had established a position. The two armies finally came face to face. The silence preceding the battle was almost absolute. On one side, thousands of Viking warriors gripped axes, swords, spears, and round shields scarred by years of campaigning. On the other, Saxon soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, forming a long shield wall. Both sides knew that this fight would decide far more than a simple territorial dispute. It would decide the future of England. When the battle began, the clash between the two lines was brutal. Shields collided with tremendous violence. Axes carved paths through the formations. Swords sought small openings in the enemy's defenses. The sound of metal echoed across the field as war cries mingled with the din of shields and spears. The Vikings fought in the manner that had made them famous throughout Europe. Rapid attacks, fierce aggression, experience gained over decades of military campaigns. But this time, they encountered a different kind of adversary. Alfred had learned from all his previous defeats. Instead of allowing his troops to scatter, he maintained discipline throughout the battle. The Saxon shield wall held firm. Each man protected the comrade beside him. When a warrior fell, another immediately took his place. The formation held. The Viking attacks became increasingly difficult. For hours, neither side could gain a decisive advantage. The battlefield turned into a test of physical endurance, courage, and discipline. Gradually, however, the strain began to take its toll on the invaders. The Saxon lines remained organized. Alfred's men advanced slowly, pushing the Vikings back. For the first time in many years, the Great Heathen Army faced an enemy capable of matching its determination. Realizing the situation was becoming critical, Guthrum ordered a retreat. The Vikings left the field and took refuge in a nearby fortification. But Alfred had no intention of repeating the mistakes made by earlier English kings. Instead of allowing the invaders to escape and regroup, he completely surrounded the enemy position. For several days, the Saxons blocked all supply routes. No food got in, no reinforcements arrived. Inside the stronghold, the situation was becoming desperate. Supplies were dwindling rapidly. Hunger began to weaken the warriors. Left with no alternatives, Guthrum realized that continued resistance would mean the total destruction of his army. Only one option remained: negotiation. The two leaders met to discuss terms of peace. The agreement reached would become known as the Treaty of Wedmore. Although some details of the treaty are debated by historians, its consequences would profoundly alter the history of England. As part of the agreement, Guthrum agreed to withdraw his forces from Wessex. Furthermore, he agreed to receive Christian baptism. The ceremony took place shortly thereafter. According to the chronicles, Alfred himself became Guthrum's godfather, symbolizing the official end of hostilities between the two leaders. This gesture held immense political significance. It represented more than just a religious conversion. It was a commitment to peace, a public demonstration that both sides recognized the need to establish a new order in England. But Alfred understood that military victory alone would not solve every problem. The Vikings continued to occupy vast regions in the north and east of the island. Expelling them completely would be virtually impossible. A lasting solution had to be found. Thus, the Danelaw emerged. This name came to designate the extensive region of England where the laws, customs, and influence of Scandinavian settlers predominated. There, many Vikings left the life of conquerors behind for good. They became farmers, traders, craftsmen, builders. They founded new villages. They expanded existing towns. They created trade networks linking England to Scandinavia, the Baltic Sea, and even the Islamic world. Little by little, the English and Scandinavians began to live side by side. Intermarriage between the two peoples became common. Old Norse words were incorporated into the English language. New agricultural techniques spread throughout the occupied regions. Even their legal systems began to influence one another. War had given way to a profound cultural transformation. Meanwhile, Alfred initiated a true revolution in Wessex. Convinced that future invasions were inevitable, he completely reorganized the kingdom's defense system. He ordered the construction of a network of fortified towns, known as burhs, strategically distributed across the territory. These strongholds protected the population and made surprise attacks difficult. He also reformed the army. Instead of calling up all men only during emergencies, he created a system of rotating military service. While some soldiers remained on campaign, others continued working the fields, ensuring food production. For the first time, Wessex was capable of sustaining prolonged warfare. Alfred also turned his attention to the sea. Realizing that long ships were the Vikings' primary advantage, he ordered the construction of larger vessels better suited to English waters. These initiatives would give rise to what many historians consider the first steps toward the future English Navy. But perhaps his greatest legacy was not military. Passionate about knowledge since childhood, Alfred encouraged education throughout the kingdom. He sponsored translations of important works from Latin into Old English. He founded centers of learning. He promoted the training of scribes. He strengthened monasteries and schools. To him, a strong kingdom required soldiers capable of fighting, but it also required people capable of thinking. It was this combination of intelligence, planning, and courage that transformed Alfred into one of the few rulers in English history to receive a title reserved for very few kings: Alfred the Great. His victory at Edington did not definitively drive the Vikings out of England, but it prevented the entire island from being conquered. More than that, it preserved the independence of Wessex and laid the foundations for the future unification of England. Without Alfred, the history of England, and perhaps of Europe itself, might have taken a completely different path. Meanwhile, the Viking Age was far from over. Guthrum's descendants would remain in the Danelaw. New Scandinavian kings would emerge. Further invasions would cross the North Sea. And in the decades that followed, a new name would begin to strike fear across Europe. Sweyn Forkbeard, his son, Nut the Great, would build an empire that made even the legendary Great Heathen Army seem small by comparison. The story of the Vikings was about to enter its most ambitious chapter. Let us know in the comments what you thought of this chapter, and don't forget to subscribe to the Era After Era channel so you don't miss the upcoming chapters. See you there.